Welcome everyone to Huawei's Great Minds Talk. I'll be your host today. I'm Zoe Zhang from Huawei Public Affairs team. On the 9th of this month, Huawei in Dongguan unveiled its 7th and most advanced cybersecurity transparency center. On the opening ceremony, Huawei's rotating chairman Ken Hu addressed a point that was quite appalling. He said, according to research, in 2021 only, damages from cybercrime might reach $6 trillion. That was such a loss. And so today, it is great to have 3 experts in cybersecurity in this room discussing how we can work together for a more secure cyberspace. First of all, let me introduce Mr. Bill Mill, who is one of the top campaigners for digital ethics. He's the founder of the Crisis Team, which is a digital era crisis management firm. He has extensive expertise from fintech to govtech, working for firms large and small. Hi, Bill, welcome.
Hi there.
And the second guest today is Dr. Kevin Curran. He's a professor of cybersecurity, executive co-director of the Legal Innovation Center and group leader of the Ambient Intelligence and Web Technologies Research Group at Ulster University. He's also a senior member of the IEEE. Hi, Kevin, great to have you today. And then let's welcome Mr.
Thank you.
Murphy. He's the cybersecurity advisor working from Huawei's Cybersecurity Transparency Center in Brussels. Prior to joining Huawei, he was the international director of BSI Group's cybersecurity and information resilience professional services business. Welcome, Com.
Happy to be here.
Why not we start our conversation by spending some time discussing the cyber threat landscape right now. Why cybersecurity is becoming more critical every day, and what kind of challenges do we face right now?
I think we've never been so reliant on technology, and we've never been so interconnected. And this means that by the very nature of things, we've never been so vulnerable. And unfortunately, the threat landscape, as it is termed, is increasing exponentially with more and more people connected, with more and more devices. And I think it's only going to become more and more difficult to protect all of this. And unfortunately, the landscape is tilted against us here in the fact that we need to be fortunate all the time in keeping the threats at bay, but the malicious actors only need to be successful occasionally. And therefore, we've got our work cut out, as I'm sure my colleagues will agree.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. I think an important point to mention too is it's clearly very lucrative from the point of view of the cyber criminals, and you know it's relatively easy for them to carry out some of these attacks. You know, they don't necessarily need the technical prowess to code some of these ransomware tools, for example, themselves. They can actually get them from somebody who does that for them or pay for it. You know, and actually something we talked about before, Bill, from the criminal's perspective, it's fairly low risk. You know, they don't really have to leave the house to do this, and it's quite difficult to catch them because really what they're doing is routing these attacks through multiple systems which are in multiple jurisdictions, and to try to counter that, you know, there's a high degree of coordination into potentially jurisdictions that maybe don't have the willingness all the time, whether it's resources or expertise, to cooperate. So it's as you say, Bill, the cards are stacked against us. But that said, I think there's a lot we can do. I think there are some good initiatives underway. For example, there are international platforms to, you know, that bring diverse groups and individuals together to discuss these things. And for example, the Paris Call is one, or Geneva Dialogue is another. We participate in these groups. And I think that's what needs to be done. It's a multilateral approach through platforms built for cooperation and discussion and engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. Many years ago, the bank robber Willie Sutton in the United States was asked why he robbed banks, and his answer was, well, that's where the money is. And of course, everything is moving online now. Even within society, cash is increasingly becoming rare. There's so many instances now of people not being able to pay for goods with cash. So we are moving to a cashless society, and we're also moving to obviously an online market where everything we buy is literally online. And of course, with that, of course, the future of the internet and the future of currencies online is really cryptocurrencies, whether it's Bitcoin or another one. But of course, really cryptocurrencies have accelerated crime online because it's now lucrative, and for the first time in your life you commit crimes and remain anonymous. See, this year is even a movement away from Bitcoin to Monero again. So really it's down to that, but also as you say that the good guys, we have to protect every single avenue, but the bad guys only have to get lucky once.
Yeah, and both of my colleagues here have mentioned how lucrative it is, and we need to look very much not only at what motivates people on all sides, but also how committed they are. I know that from the perspective of the cyber criminal, the fact that it can be so lucrative is a massive motivation. And these guys are very committed and they are very sophisticated. And therefore, again, it's not a level playing field because many of the companies that they're seeking to attack, if they small schools or hospitals or mum and pop organizations, simply don't have anything like the same level of sophistication on the side of the defense. And even in the larger, more sophisticated organizations, you need to look at what the motivations are here. And one of the things that I have called out on numerous occasions is the fact that in almost every organization, in almost every company, the individuals are all motivated on ROI measures. These are things like revenue and profit. And you think of your last performance assessment and what you are measured on, those tend to be the factors in play. And the same is true at board level. Not enough people have some sort of measure of risk in their performance evaluation. And if this were the case, I think we'd have board members thinking very, very differently. They need to be financially aware. They need to be business aware. And now they have to be cyber aware as well. And not enough of them are.
I'll come in on that, Bill, actually, because you strike a chord for a number of reasons. I've been saying for years, absolutely, that at board level, we need board members who are cybersecurity literate. It's not good enough to say anymore to say that's someone else's job. And in fact, we very much follow that rule here in Huawei. As you know, our global cybersecurity privacy committee is chaired by a member of the board, in fact, and our CEO and reports directly to the CEO. So we very much take it seriously. But I think you raise another interesting point. The second thing I'll say about the incentives. You're right. I mean, if it's for the most part, KPIs don't mention, cybersecurity, but in a place like Huawei, where we have a responsibility to our customers to give them secure products, we've given this a lot of thought, actually. And I think one thing, we'll just share this with you as an interesting thing. For example, in the product development teams, they are actually incentivized via KPIs and financial performance rewards to ensure as few vulnerabilities end up in the products we deliver to the market as possible. And actually, what happens alongside that is via what we call our independent cybersecurity lab. The penetration testers in that team are actually rewarded on the exact opposite, which is finding as many vulnerabilities as possible in the products before they get released out to the marketplace. So what you see there is quite interesting, healthy competition, competing KPIs, but for the right reasons. I mean, you can imagine the interesting conversations those two teams have together in the cafeteria. But certainly, I think that's a good example of what you just raised. That there are innovative ways that we can incentivize employees and individuals and businesses to do the right thing or do a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you're right about the need for clever organizations that have people who understand cyber or at the very least technology, because rather than just packing the board with people who have been venture capitalists or just understand business, which is fair enough, but you have to have the cyber nowadays because of the consequences. But it's like I've always had a bugbear about politics in democracies like Ireland, traditionally in the country. What you would have had was traditionally school teachers becoming politicians and rising to become what we call them TDs at the top. But and that's fair enough. But what I want to see economists. I want to see actually nearly forced smart people being brought in. But I want any government to be full of economists because that's what it's about, the economy. But what I love actually to go with this is one of the things which has happened in the United States lately is where the US government are forcing companies to adopt a software bill of materials. Now, this has been known in the industry for a little while, but outside of cybersecurity, most people don't know this. What I love about this is you have to be able to document because software has become so complex and we build our software systems and we put them together, but we're using third party, we're using the supply chain. We're using libraries which have been written 20 years ago. We're using libraries that were written last week for a year. We're using a front end there. We're using a back end. We're using an open source. We're using a closed operating system. Which version is it? The software bill of materials requires you to outline everything about your host, the software you're running on, the cloud system, the third party libraries, your SDK. And in other words, at least then you can have people also within the company who are checking for all the vulnerabilities there. And I like that because software is not written, you don't write a piece of software now in one piece of system in-house. What we're doing is plugging in everything. We're building, if you want to see everything, all the software in the libraries as Lego pieces, we're putting them all together the best, companies are the best they can, but there has to be accountability into that and interest inspection again. So again, and your average business person would never understand this ever. So cyber is become so critical to so many aspects of our life, and we need to have more people who understand it on the boards.
And I don't think we need exclusively economists necessarily, but I think we need greater awareness of what assets and what risks we have. And talking as we just heard there about actually doing some sort of audit. Maybe this will give us a better idea on the value of the data assets that we hold, and that might induce us to protect them a little bit better. And also on the risk side, having a better way of auditing our risk will actually focus minds on some of the threats that exist. One of my concerns in some of this is that organizations can be somewhat complacent and focus on the fact that there is cyber insurance available and that they would use cyber insurance sometime as a substitute for adequate cyber security. And I think this is a massive risk. For starters, the insurance organizations aren't really going to pay out on most claims. If you're familiar with many of the policies that exist, there are so many exclusions in the typical cyber insurance policy that they can get out of almost any claim for almost any incident. But the other thing is, in order to value the risk properly to set a premium, they need to do some sort of a risk assessment. And this may be fine for large Fortune 500 companies where they can send in an audit time and team, and that team can assess the risk accurately and at some cost, and possibly recommend remediatory measures. But for smaller organizations, for mom and pop businesses, for small schools or hospitals or whatever, this is never going to be possible. And the current way that they assess risk is by using risk rating schemes where they have a web crawler that goes and looks at externally facing endpoints and assesses them for known vulnerabilities. And this has been compared to sort of assessing the fire safety of a building from using a photograph taken from the opposite side of the street. You'd have no real idea of what the fire vulnerability of that building would be. You wouldn't know if it had sprinkler systems or it had flammable materials in it. And a lot of the assessment for cyber risk at this moment in time is equally crude. And I think it would be far better to be focused rather on cyber insurance or some sort of crude metrics like that, on actually doing some of the basics And you can
Yeah.
start with you can start with some basics and then move on from there.
You know, Bill, you took the words from my mouth, actually, because as you spoke there, I was thinking just that. If you think about it, actually last year, US CERT, the people responsible for categorizing or cataloging vulnerabilities, identified 17,000 vulnerabilities, and I think about 4,000 of them were high risk. And that's all the attackers need. They need vulnerabilities that they can exploit. And therefore, as you say, what you need to do is bring it back down to basics and just remind people of the basics. And the basics are identifying vulnerabilities and patching them in a timely fashion, such as the door gets closed. Of course, there's other things, simple things like segmentation in the network, so that if one area of the network gets compromised, the attacker can't move around to other parts, or two-factor authentication, for example. So I completely agree. You touched on a lot of things there, but really, from our point of view, this is all about bringing it back to basics. And to touch on what you said, Kevin, to bring the politics into it, that's a distraction. I've always said when you mix technology or science with politics, you get politics. And it's a distraction from discussions like this, where really what we need to do is encourage organizations to do the basics, to do the right things, to identify problems and fix them, and not rely on insurance that will probably never actually end up paying out anyway, as you say. I mean, there is an ample and growing attack surface, what we call in the jargon the attack surface. In other words, things that you can attack. There's more than there's ever been. The last year and a half, here we are all, for the most part, working from home or remotely, which just shows, again, how reliant we are, and going to continue to be reliant on this connectivity. So I think there's a lot of simple things that we can do. There is a role, I think, for the regulators to play, if we wanted to bring that into the mix, and governments to play in terms of, raising the bar. And we do see at least some initiatives there. I mean, if you think about it, I can't remember, but it's literally several hundred, at least, pieces of individual cybersecurity related legislation were passed around the world, I think in about 150 countries. So, we do see governments trying to raise the bar. And a big part of that, I think, is to have some oversight as to what our critical industries and those industries that we rely on do insofar as cybersecurity is concerned. But really, it's all about the basics.
Yeah, and I think people fail to realize that some really simple approaches, starting off with probably phishing training, maybe multi-factor authentication that you've mentioned, some of these sort of approaches can eliminate a large number of the most simple risks out there. Obviously, you're going to need some support for the more sophisticated threats, and seeing the investment that Huawei is making and others in providing this level of more sophisticated support is to be applauded. And I think we need to see more international collaboration on these type of investments, on threat detection and reporting, and then sort of coming together to challenge a number of the threats that exist out there. And we come back to the sort of the motivations and the commitment here. We need to be motivated towards collaborating, and also to closing down some of the safe havens that exist for some of the malicious actors that are going to continue to do this because it is profitable, because they're getting away from it, until we make it impossible for them.
Yeah, Bill, you mentioned international collaboration. So I think we all agree that cybersecurity is very much a systemic issue worldwide. So all industry are being called to take it seriously than ever before, and not to mention public sectors. So I wish to know your thoughts on how we can improve cybersecurity and increase the social trust, and what role do each of the sectors play?
Well, maybe I could set this to paint the picture. Initially, Judy, we believe strongly that this is a shared responsibility. There's an ecosystem of actors, and all of whom have a very critical role to play. So I take it from the bottom up, I suppose you have people like ourselves, manufacturers, and we take our role extremely seriously. I think 5% of our annual R&D investment goes into security. We've 3,000 people working in cybersecurity around the world, and we do what we can to deliver the most secure products to our customers. But we can't. We can't do everything alone. We need then the next layer of the people who provide you your communication services, operators, and so on. They've obviously obligations. They've regulatory obligations, clearly. But they've obligations to their customers to provide, safe and secure communications environment. We have a whole service provider ecosystem providing all sorts of things on top. They've their things to do. We have the enterprises and individuals, and Bill has talked about them at some length just now. But I think there, as I mentioned, we have governments and regulators, and we have people like standards organizations. Standards organizations have done a great job of telling us what good looks like, what good cybersecurity looks like. So when we go to a government goes to a sector and says you must do X or Y, it's based on verifiable, independent, objective standards. So there is this ecosystem, and it's about, good cybersecurity doesn't come about in a vacuum. It's about all of those players collaborating, communicating, engaging, and sharing. I mean, for example, recently we saw GSMA launch, which is the global association for the telecommunications industry, launch a kind of a knowledge base for 5G security, which is a collaborative effort of the entire industry to basically help people understand what the risks are, how to manage them, how to mitigate them, and so on and so forth. And that's a great example of kind of collaboration. So we do see this, and we should see more of it. We need to set these kind of shared goals, align ourselves, assign accountability and responsibility. And that's the kind of approach that we need to meet these challenges of today and that we're going to see into the future.
I couldn't agree more. I think the collaboration is absolutely essential. If we aren't working together, we'll all be picked off individually. And if there isn't a sort of linked up collaboration where all of these different organizations are working together, the threat actors will simply find the cracks that exist and exploit them. And they are real opportunists at exploiting every single opportunity there is there. And it needs to be required on us to make sure that there are no cracks, that we are joined up, and not only that the defence is there and that we're all working together, but also in terms of the commitment by organisations and national authorities to crack down on the threat actors, to make sure that there is a level of follow-up and prosecution to ensure that they don't have safe havens, that life isn't easy for them. And collaboration is going to be required, because as long as there are places they can operate from, they will continue to do so.
Exactly, Bill. See, we have a number of international treaties which countries, have sincerely signed up for, but at the end of the day, each is suspicious. The major powers can be suspicious of each other, and the problem is, what happens is cyber weapons are created, and we need to restrict them, because the problem is everything gets leaked. So the cyber weapon one country might create against another, for whatever task that is, but that just gets leaked and then leaks down to the commercial side, down to the individuals, and is used to attack us and the public and innocents and other countries. And that's the problem. What we really need is, so any country can sign up and do a token, sign up and say, look, we're going to abide to this, but you don't know if the attack that just happened on your organization came from a government with £50 billion, or £50 trillion, whatever, but annual budget, or two guys in a basement. Because cyber is unique, that the way you can hide your trash, you can reroute, you can do things which you cannot do And we can never tell what the size of budgets are in some countries. Again, they're annual budgets. In the past, we can roughly estimate the size of an army by flying over with our spy satellites and counting the number of tanks and whatever on the ground and warships and all that. But with cyber, you haven't got a clue really how many people are working in a cyber command. And what we really need is an international cyber court. We have to get there very quickly, where we literally have a court that we all adhere to and we all agree, and the punishments are vetted out, and it's kind of like, that we all, okay, take it on the face that it's neutral, it's intelligence, is whatever else, but we need an international cyber court.
The International Cyber Court, and what kind of obstacles do you think is on our way to a more secure cyberspace? What is the biggest obstacle there?
I think the nature of the game is changing rapidly, and we know that regulations don't move as quickly, laws don't move as quickly, treaties don't move as quickly. These guys are not only very opportunistic, but they are moving with the technology as fast as the technology is advancing. And many of the things that we rely on to combat them simply aren't keeping up. And we've seen this in the move to things like zero trust, where you used to be able to define a perimeter and defend things as at the edge. And that simply isn't possible anymore. We're all working remotely. We're all using cloud and SaaS applications. We need to have a different approach, and everyone understands zero trust and why we need to have that. But the more that we use the cloud and other sort of types of technology, the techniques and the tools that we need to use to defend ourselves need to be able to advance in step with that. And the reality is that artificial intelligence is changing the game, and both sides are using it. I mean, the attackers are using AI to identify vulnerabilities that they can exploit, and the defenders are using the same type of tools to identify vulnerabilities that need to patch. And it's an arms race, and it's a competition that's ongoing. But we can't afford to sit back and wait for some of the regulations to wait for some of the laws, the international commitments and treaties and laws to catch up as soon as they can.
Yeah, I think it brings us back to a point raised early on in the discussion in terms of what's preventing us engaging on this topic. It's a global problem, and that needs a global response. And that therein lies the problem, in that the geopolitical environment is distracting from that, and it's difficult in that kind of environment to bring people together when there's this kind of inherent mistrust. So Huawei, for us, that's a distraction, unhelpful distraction, but it's also the reality. And what we try to do is focus on our customers and talk to them and understand what they need, understand how we can work with them to give them better security solutions. Bill, you've touched on this in that there are technological solutions to some of this. There is the possibility of deploying AI solutions. In other words, you're doing less with more. We know about the global cybersecurity skills shortage. So, every organization doesn't have a 24-hour-by-7 security operations center. So we need to provide them with better technology, better solutions that allow them to do more with less. And that's what many thousands of our R&D researchers spend all day, every day thinking about doing, is how can we give better solutions, leveraging emerging technologies like AI to do more with less. Certainly, I think we just have to get on with that. We just have to start to, feed the world the technology they need, the solutions they need, and to do that, we need to talk to each other.
Yeah, so the recent geopolitical tensions is actually really leading to the increased mistrust in cybersecurity. Do you all agree? And what do you think the consequences would be?
I think mistrust is at the root of a lot of this. And we've already identified that collaboration is required. And collaboration needs to happen at a geopolitical level. It needs to happen between associations, and we mentioned GSMA earlier. It needs to happen based on standards. I mean, one of the things that we find is that within the cybersecurity arena, there's no shortage of tools and technologies. If anything, there's oversupply, and many CISOs or IT teams are almost spending as much time dealing with the complexity of their own tools and their own security software in trying to integrate it and trying to work out where gaps still exist and what else they need to do. And they're spending almost more time with the complexity than they are actually dealing with the threats out there. And it's overcoming that complexity, possibly having standards to engender interoperability so that we can get away from the mistrust and move towards a far more collaborative environment at all levels, be it geopolitical, be it industry associations, be it technologies and standards. We need this across the board.
Yeah, I'll quickly come in with one thing just to add to that. I think, we take the approach that really and promote that zero trust approach. And in fact, nobody should be trusted. There is no such thing as trustworthy anything really, because everything has vulnerabilities. Everything needs to get patched. And we hear country of origin talked about, but look, I can promise you the attackers don't care where your kit is from if it has a vulnerability that they can exploit. So, I think we have to kind of try to move that to that kind of a zero trust model to say, well, how can we get some kind of third party, independent, objective assurance that something is good from a cybersecurity point of view? And I think the answer to some of that, at least one of the answers, is in independent standards, independent certification schemes. And we do see some work there. You mentioned GSMA being in partnership with 3GPP, being the 5G standards organization, have come up with NISAS, which is a security assurance scheme targeting specifically, obviously, telecommunications equipment. So there is things that we can do to kind of overcome trust. I mean, in a world where nobody trusts anybody, these days, we need to find solutions that give some kind of independent assurance that something has checks all the boxes from a cybersecurity point of view. The final thing is, I'm sitting here in Brussels, actually, behind me, the part of our exhibition centre in the Transparency Centre, which was 2 years ago, opened its doors. And at the time, which was 2 years ago, we said, assume we have this ABC principle, which is actually central to our kind of philosophy generally when it comes to cybersecurity, which is, assume nothing, believe nobody, and check everything. And that's the approach I think that needs to be taken. We can't take anybody's word for it that it's secure because of where I'm from or who I am or what record I may or may not have. It's really we need some independence, and I think we've all pointed to that. Some independent oversight checks that give that objective assurance regardless.
Yeah, we do. And why international collaboration, what we're going to see in the future is machines attacking machines using artificial intelligence, machine learning techniques, and the machines defending themselves using artificial intelligence and machine learning attacks. So it depends on who's got the best AI algorithm wins. It's like stock trading, day trading, everywhere else. The algorithms do it for us, and you have people trying to do whatever. We're going to find a kind of an akin to a kind of stock trading, day trading system of attacks going back and forwards, trying to make profits. How much ransomware and the cryptocurrency being exchanged automatically, where it's like the system decides, oh my God, they got in too deep. oh, let's just pay the ransomware automatically, and it's all being done for us. And you could be out in your deck chair while the systems are being attacked. And you know, you may think that's Hollywood or science fiction, but the UN produced a report this week. It was reported about a Cargo 2 quadcopter in Libya. For the first time ever, a drone targeted by itself autonomously. You know, it's the kind of the vision of the future, which was, you know, kind of prophesied by a lot of people, including Elon Musk again, you know, and Professor Noel Sharkey from the UK. But literally, the drone took on its, you know, it did its own decision. So that's the world that could be in the future. That's why we need, you know, the good guys to stick together.
Well, I like the sound of being able to sit in a deck chair and my job being done for me. But obviously, we're going to need a lot of people to put in a lot of effort in order to try and combat the very real threats that exist out there. And you're right, it is going to be increasingly automated. But the more it's automated, it's just driving up the volume of attacks. And that's leading to some of the volume challenges. I mean, the number of false positives you get in some threat detection systems are driving people mad. And it's actually, we need far better levels of sophistication, either using AI or using standards so that you can integrate systems so they're not tripping each other, in order to actually be more effective to identify where the really serious threats do exist. And the investment that companies like Huawei are making in the cybersecurity centers, in their R&D, I think is absolutely to be applauded. And we need to see more of it, and we need to see more collaboration, as we've all just discussed.
Thanks for bringing that up, Bill. Appreciate that, because, you know, that's the point of these transparency centers, actually. I guess there's a couple of points. But key is to provide a platform or a set of platforms through which this kind of research, shared innovation, shared discussions can take place. In fact, last year here in the centre, just before the world shut down, we did have a workshop discussing AI and the future of AI and security, and so on. And I think that it's really important, and that's what the platform. That's what these centres are for, is to bring these groups together and to share. I mean, share knowledge and ideas, because you know, we are talking about a future where we will have, you know, this everything connected, IoT connected world. We'll have autonomous driving. We'll have, you know, super fast, low latent connectivity, which will then facilitate, you know, medical innovation and factory innovation, and all of these things actually raise the stakes. And therefore, we need to plan for that. We need to think about that. We need to understand what are the solutions with the limited people who are going to be able to manage that complexity that you've talked about, Bill. What are the solutions to allow them to do things better, quicker, faster, cheaper, and so on and so on. But yeah.
But I think as much as Huawei's investments applauded, no single company can actually help solve this problem. It is going to be through the sort of collaboration and research, the collaboration on threat detection, the collaboration on standards, that we're actually going to be able to make progress. And I think this is absolutely essential. And I think that if we can overcome some of the geopolitical barriers here, I think there is enormous gains that we can be made.
I think that is of our audience interest is Huawei itself a threat, and why is Huawei willing to open up its capabilities by establishing the transparency center?
Well, I suppose I have to take that question. It's really clear that to us that we need to do all these collaborative things that we've all talked about, and as I said, the centres are a part of that. But more than that, it's about us basically saying, come in, have a look, see what we do, talk to us, and most importantly, test us. So a major function of both the center I'm in here in Brussels and our newly launched center in Dongguan in China is that we have a substantial product validation facility where our customers and other stakeholders can come and test our products, but they can come with any tools they like, any expertise they like. There are no limits. They can come, and we stand as our CSO, John Suffolk says, we stand naked in front of the world. And that's really what it's all about. You know, come and have a look, come and talk to us, come and test us. And that's really important to us. And in fact, it makes us better because, you know, inevitably people that bring these amazing experts to test our products will from time to time find bugs and vulnerabilities, which thereafter we fix. So it raises the bar for us. We're always looking over our shoulder, and we hope to continue on that basis.
Yeah, I would just like to echo the fact that I think you can't simply look at country of origin in order to dictate a lot of the basis for trust, because it is wrong to conflate Huawei with China as a country, or to conflate Kaspersky with Russia as a country, or to conflate Cisco with America as a country, or any origin, given the fact that, for starters, a lot of the Cisco equipment is made in China anyway, which makes a lot of the arguments academic. But also the fact that I think Huawei has put up its equipment for really detailed analysis, certainly in the UK, and we were close to a point of giving Huawei a clean bill of health when access to chip technology was denied to it, which finally led to the ban, which wasn't providing a particularly level playing field here. But also at the same time, Huawei had offered to license its 5G technology to any other vendor and potentially to sell the crown jewels and its source code to another vendor. And in offering to do so, it is putting that up not only for sale, but for examination. And for Huawei to be opening the doors of its security centers is only to be applauded, because the more that we understand that Huawei is looking to collaborate here and not to sort of act in a malicious manner, the better we're going to overcome some of the trust issues and move towards the sort of collaborative environment that we discussed earlier.
It's funny, I've been teaching at a university for approaching 22 years now. You know, I know I don't look that old, but so usually when it comes to cybersecurity, I'm flipping, or in the first day I say, you know, if you want to be safe online, don't buy a mobile device or a computer. And if you do buy it, don't turn it on. And if you do turn it on, only turn it on for 5 minutes. But there's a little bit of logic in that. There's your footprint online. If you don't go to visit dodgy sites and everything else, the more secure your browser, your platform would be. But of course, you got to get work done. So, but there's a principle in computing which you get it, and it's just as true. It's as true as, you know, any law in physics, and it's called Kirchhoff's principle. And what you do in Kirchhoff's principle is you just assume everyone knows the system, and the only thing that has to be secret is the key. So in other words, and the smart engineers in Huawei know this, and they know it, other companies as well. You can literally have every line of your code for everything you have. But as long as you've managed the cryptographic part correctly and the keys, and the customers know that, you've designed that properly, because the law of maths protects us. Maths, you know, the large prime numbers and elliptical cryptic, you know, that they're protecting us all the line on the padlock. Of course, non-computer people don't know that, but you can let every single line of code out. But all you have to do is make sure you've implemented the cryptographic part correctly, and then you rely on the law of maths. And that's what we know when they're engineers again. Of course, that's why, you know, and the more people, the more eyeballs that see it, and Huawei engineers know that too. The more people who look at their code, the safer it is, because that will get fed back and you fix it.
So, what will the future of the cybersecurity look like? And you describe what good looks like, and you describe a lot of challenges we are having right now. And can you try to depict the picture in the near future, what the cybersecurity will look like?
Have you got your crystal ball, Bill?
Well, I'm obviously going to need to dust it off. No, I think awareness is the main building block that we need to start from. And we go back to the vulnerabilities in the organizations out there. We're talking now about organizations that have seen any number of hacking incidents, and these are widespread. They've been in the press very, very frequently, and yet this really hasn't moved the needle in most boardrooms to actually start to take things seriously. I think we need to find a way of maybe evangelizing through calls such as this. It may be through any other means of actually trying to get that message across that there is a very real threat here. And potentially, having lived through a year or more of a pandemic and a big health threat, having lived through the financial collapse and the credit crunch and the financial threat, maybe these can be examples to hold up to board level members to say, look, there are some very real threats out. And the biggest ones on the horizon, maybe the climate threat, it may be the cyber threat, but whatever you do, the cyber threat one that you need to be taking seriously, and that you need to be taking it seriously now. And in order to support that, we need vendors such as Huawei investing in it as it is, and we need others to be doing the same. And again, coming back to the standards and the collaboration to make that a reality. But none of that is going to matter if the organizations that are under threat don't have sufficient risk awareness and aren't taking this seriously.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, one thing I think about the future is that I think kind of being hacked is going to become less of a dirty word, let's say, that it's really inevitable that many organizations will eventually get hacked. And what I think would be the measure of good, really, in terms of you know, the impact of it will be how they dealt with it. So in other words, you know, rather than, it's not all about prevention, of course you've got to do that, but eventually if your armory gets infiltrated, it's about how quickly did you identify it, how well did you contain it, in what manner did you communicate with the various the regulators or others who you'll need to report to in terms of the incident. How well did you treat your customers in terms of, or other stakeholders in terms of informing them and helping them manage the impact if it's, for example, personally identifiable information that was compromised. So for me, I'd like to see, you know, let's say the maturity levels increase in terms of you know, how organizations deal with it holistically, rather than did they get in or did they not get in. Well, if they get in, what happened? How quickly did you get them out again? How bad did it impact the business, and so on. So I think that's one thing I think we'll see in the future in the world of cybersecurity, that there'll be more of an acceptance around being hacked, that it will happen to the best of organizations who have the best of sometimes of defenses and all the budgets and resources in the world. But, you know, eventually things can go wrong for one reason or another. So that's something I think to look to.
And I think the way we respond is emblematic with how seriously we're taking things. In too many organizations, the whole cyber thing is seen as an IT problem. And to a large extent, during the prevention and detection phase, it is largely an IT issue, although it needs to be taken seriously at all levels. But the moment we have a penetration, the moment we have an incident, it is no longer an IT problem. It is a business problem, because you've got a reputational problem, you've got a legal problem, you've got a business problem if they've closed off your systems and you can't operate anymore. You've got all sorts of problems, and everyone needs to be taking it seriously. And what a lot of people don't realize is that GDPR mandates the fact that you need to test, assess and evaluate your processes on a regular basis, and not enough companies do this. Obviously, the best way to do this is through some sort of immersive simulation exercise that actually really puts you to the test. I mean, when we learn to drive here in the UK, we don't expect somebody to go and sit at the wheel and immediately be able to drive on any particular road. You need to have some road sense. You need to be able to rehearse and to do this. And it doesn't just come from a classroom exercise. We do have a theory test here in the UK, but we also have a practical test. You need to be able to show that you know how to drive in order to get your license. And therefore, we need to have the same approach in terms of incident response. We need to rehearse these things so that people can be incident ready. So they need to move into that mode when things happen. And this needs to be taken seriously by all levels. And when it comes to these simulations, either a company is not doing that, and all too many aren't, or we see that the senior level people, when it comes to these simulations, they delegate it to more junior people to take part in these practices just so that they can tick the box and do that. That is pointless, because if you delegate to a junior team to go through the rehearsals, when it comes to the real thing, the people that are actually going to be sitting in the room trying to save your company aren't going to be the people who sat through the rehearsals. And it makes a farce of it. And that comes back to how seriously these things are taken at board level.
I've always said, Bill, when a CEO discovers that his systems have been hacked, that the first person he'll call generally isn't the IT manager, it will be his lawyer. So, yeah, I agree.
Actually, Bill, you just reminded me, actually, about 53 years ago, believe it or not, Sweden changed from driving on the left-hand side of the road to the right-hand side of the road. And there was no incident. In one night, they just changed. Actually, you're right about Colin, about the GDPR. You know, in fact, I want to slap politicians behind the cookie law. That ridiculous law where it pops up a cookie telling us the site accepts cookies and doesn't do anything for cyber education, doesn't do anything for security, and ruins the user experience, and also makes people weary of things which might have helped them in the future. They should be, you know, those people should be on trial for crimes against online humanity. What I would say is about again that in the future, data is the new oil. Okay, so data is so important, and what I like about GDPR is that it focuses on the right people to hold them accountable for protecting our data, because the more leaks there are, the more likely it is we get phished or people can impersonate us and whatever else going down the road. So the future of cybersecurity is the question. What I see it is that, and actually Tim Berners-Lee's behind this vision as well, the guy who invented the World Wide Web. It's where pods, our data is stored in pods. And therefore we share our data, we control our data, and we share it. So if Facebook want my data, I open it up to them, and Twitter and all that. And the great thing about that is, if I change my address, I only have to change my address in one place. I log in and I change it in my pod. It's automatically updated in all the social media or whatever accounts have it. The area I'm involved in my research is searchable encryption. And that means, of course, you can encrypt your data and store it in the cloud, because everything is moving to the cloud. And you can store it there, and if it gets leaked, okay, it's encrypted. And we trust the beauty of maths there. But you can't do any processing on data. So therefore, not many people do that. But searchable encryption allows you to take your data, encrypt it, you store the private key, you upload it to the cloud, you can still perform processing, modifications, deletion, insertions, but the cloud provider, third parties have no access to it. You control that data. So if data breaches occur or ransomware comes, and all they have is gobbledygook, they don't have the personal identifying information. And that's the future, is a kind of a searchable encryption. It actually comes from homomorphic encryption, but that's where people also have to control their own data in the future, so that we don't just hand it over to third parties.
I couldn't agree more. And again, going back to the lack of shame in having breaches, one of the things that we see is that the peak time for reporting a breach is typically a Friday afternoon. And there is a very good reason for this. And that is because when you discover there might be a problem on your networks, unless it's ransomware, which is immediately obvious, if you think that there's any type of other kind of breach, you will typically not necessarily want to admit to your superiors. You will want to try and do a DIY fix to try and get to the bottom of the problem without calling in the experts, without setting off the alarm. And it tends to be towards a Friday afternoon before the weekend when you finally admit that you're out of your depth. You call the alarm, you admit to your superiors, and you call in the experts for support. And that is the point at which it goes from being an IT problem to a whole of business problem. What we need is that shame to be taken away so that people within the organization can readily admit there might be a breach here, there might be a problem here, and that we can possibly raise the alarm earlier, fix things earlier, and actually get to the root of the problem. So we need this, and we just had homomorphic encryption mentioned. I think that is actually another technology that I could take an entire call discussing, because I think it is a very promising technology that will help.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think we can all end this session with one or two sentences to tell our audience how we can work together for a more secure digital environment. In one or two sentences.
Okay. Why don't I start? You know, one thing I think that we've all touched on is I think that's at the very heart of all of this is respect for difference. And I think it's the fear of difference that's kind of root of all conflict in the world. There's a well-known Irish politician called John Hume, who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1998. He sadly passed away last year, actually. But he said all conflict is about difference, whether it's race, nationality, or religion. And he talked a little bit about how the European visionaries, you know, when they were talking about Europe and the EU, you could imagine Europe actually about 80 years ago was one of the most divided places in the world. There was bodies literally millions of bodies littered across the continent. So it's about overcoming that, respecting differences is going to be the key to moving forward. And I think that there's plenty of room. There's plenty of common ground, let's say, on which we can all in which we can all work and have these discussions and engagements to move forward, what I think is a very important topic.
I would say that all of this comes down to trust and respect. First of all, trust at the technology level, we need zero trust because we actually need to be on our toes looking at every single threat. But at the opposite end of the spectrum, when it comes to the organizational level, we need far more trust because we need to trust enough to be able to collaborate and to get things right. And in terms of respect, we need at a board level people to have some respect for the threat that's out there, some risk awareness, some respect for the fact that they need to be taking this seriously. And again, on the collaboration side, we need to have more respect for each other in terms of the approach that we're all making to try and help here. And if companies like Huawei are investing in technology and are looking to collaborate, let's take that and let's combine that sort of enthusiasm, that investment and that collaboration with what other people have to offer, with mutual respect to try and work together to try and crack this problem.
Yeah, I come from the same school as Bill. Why use two sentences when 200 work? So Colm actually, I worked alongside John Hume, in the same university. I used to give him a lift home quite a lot to the Bog side. He just lived over the road from me. Great man, we all loved him. I remember I had a car once. He was a Nobel laureate, and I told the young guys buying my car, Rover 600, I says, by the way, a Nobel laureate used to drive in his car, and they just looked at me, and they just hadn't got a clue. And, yeah, I hate xenophobia. Obviously, xenophobia bullshit that the United States have pulled, especially when you want, and what they've done, we've known that they've taken Cisco routers which were being shipped out to other countries and suppliers, and they just put their back doors in there and they repackaged them up, and You just get into the supply chain. There's so many things you can do, and that's what I hate. I hate this thing about, because it just leads to more inferior products, less competition in local markets, higher prices, and everything else. So what I want in the future is that people can rise above the political bullshit and just see things for what they are, and trust the tech people when we tell them, no, that's not a real threat. Yeah, that could be a real threat, but listen to the tech people more so than the politicians.
Thank you all. Thank you all for sharing. Thanks for joining us today. I hope all the audience find it very inspiring talk, and see you all next time in Great Minds Talk. Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks, guys.